Hi, I'm Dylan Taylor, Chairman and CEO of Voyager Space Holdings.
I'm Ken Eppins, founder and CEO of Orbit Guardians.
Hi, I'm Raphael Rodkin, founder of E2MC Space Ventures.
And I listen to the Cold Star Project.
And I listen to the Cold Star Project.
And I listen to the Cold Star Project.
This show is for entertainment purposes only and is not what is termed professional advice. The Cold Star Project is proudly presented by the Operational Excellence Society. Cold Star Tech is a supporter of the OPEX Society, and Jason Kanigan is a member of its board of advisors. Talk with us at Cold Star Tech to find out what we can achieve together with your Lean Six Sigma or Operational Excellence programs. And check out opexsociety.org to learn more.
So Tim Anderson has been a good friend. He's a naval commander and also been in the defense contracting field for some time. And we catch up a lot. We've got personality types that work well together, and it's always a joy and an enlightening session for when I catch up with Tim. And so the last time we did, which was mid-October, it had been some months, and he was like, Jason, I got a ton to just data dump here. And he surprised me by saying, why don't we record this and release it as just an episode? And I was like, whoa, that's totally different than the format that I usually do, which is structured and has notes and things like that. And he said, well, let's just try it out and see what happens. This is going to be very valuable for you because Tim gets out and about. I don't know about you, but my head's down and I'm working a lot of the time, just surviving, right? And I don't have time to jump on a plane as much as I would like and go to a conference or something like that or meet people. The podcast here is a main way of meeting people, and that I think is really a break on the growth of my channels and network and things like that. And I'm a guy who puts time into it. It's kind of crazy. But so Tim said, why don't we just record this thing and let it out? And so this is a personal chat. There's some personal stuff in there. There's Tim covering everything in the industry that he's seen in the last little while. And it really is astounding. It's a shift from the 2020 version of the commercial space field. Factors are different. Some of the stuff that Tim has to say right in the opening if you've been in a lab busy and not really, noticing what's been going on in the world around you, it's really going to surprise you. So I'm listening to this again and pulling out so many things. It's been a really great opportunity to catch up. So Tim, welcome.
We're in this interesting time where, and I'm seeing this across the industry, where it's very much a duck on water kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Where, like, I've been smoking 12-hour days for the last 3 weeks trying to keep up with stuff. Mm. Like, there's a lot of activity kind of waiting to burst through that a lot of people don't detect, and I don't think aren't really aware of. Partnerships and collaboration are really the name of the game now, because I think what's happened is, last year or the last couple of years when all this money was flowing into the industry, people thought that they could kind of build their own teams, get exclusive use over this premium quality talent that they could attract in, and everybody would have their team doing their thing on their cool mission. And it turned out the talent pool couldn't support that. And so a lot of things have fizzled or stalled or had challenges kind of getting off the ground. And what we've realized here, and what kind of our whole business is built on, is choose to collaborate before you choose to compete.
Okay.
Like if you've got to make a selection there, your default option should be collaborate.
Yeah.
Because it takes really premium quality engineering talent to do this higher level stuff. Mm-hmm. And we're in a situation right now where there's only so much to go around, but none of us, I think, makes optimum use of our capacity. So the only way to get better use of that, as sort of everybody on the same team, right? By all the Five Eyes partners being same team.
You would think. Okay.
Huh. The way we do that is we leverage each other's capabilities and talents and really communicate and work together towards common objectives. that's emerged as a thing. And I think the industry is really starting to accept that more. And that puts people like you in a position to talk about where those synergies are.
Okay.
And talk about those relationships, because, to this day, I'm going to say you are one of the few people I know that has such a breadth of contact, context, and understanding that you're uniquely positioned to energize these collaborations. Nobody else can do it like you. I firmly believe that.
And whatever it is, I don't see it or I take it for granted, right? I'm blind to it. Huh.
Well, have you seen anybody else ever do that, man? Take their talents for
Rhonda
granted?
Stevenson, close. Oh, well, just about everybody. I think.
Right.
Yeah. Huh.
So why would you be an exception in that?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think what you can do is rare and special. It's hard when it doesn't hit. Like, I know what that feels like, man. I know exactly what that feels like. I'm in my 16th week here at Cordis, I think.
Yeah.
And this is, after 10 years of fighting and scratching and scraping and sacrificing, I finally got into the right gig where I can just be all of who I am and leverage all of my talent and ability. 10 years.
Right.
Like, that's a long grind.
No, it is. I've had that feeling a couple times in my life of like, the train is coming. My train is coming to the stop, and then it just blows past, and you're like, but that was my train, right? That was supposed to be, and okay, and it gets you thinking. Maybe it's not going to stop, right? Or it's not going to be there for you. But I'm a believer in making your own opportunities, for sure.
And I don't think it does stop, and that's the hard part. The train doesn't stop.
Okay.
Like, you just have to get up to speed and jump on. And then you've been trying to do that for years, and you've shown, amazing amount of stamina and courage and strength that is easy to admire in my book.
Okay. Thank you.
Like, that's what I see. And I'm telling you, man, I'm out in the field talking with people, jamming with people, really talking about art of the possible and what we can do together. And there's so much desire now to collaborate that I've not seen across industry and across multiple industries before until now. And I think you're really uniquely positioned to start pushing those buttons and pulling those levers. And I don't know exactly what that translates into yet.
Yeah. How do you make
terms
money?
of, like,
How do you make a
activity?
business out of it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I believe very deeply it's a thing, and it's valuable, and it's important. So, like, we got to find a way to break through and get that going for you, because there's, like, I have like 200 cards sitting on my desk right now. And I can find synergies between all 200 of those people.
Yeah. So
right?
what do we do? Some sort of, oh my God, the word has run away in my head. Like leading the whole process for these folks, right? Where you get them in a room and you.
Well, that takes us to, that's an interesting question, right? And that takes us to the Space Economy Summit. Right, that was kind of the intent of the Space Economy Summit in particular. So, we can just talk about that. It kind of goes reverse chronological order. So that was the most recent thing. So we ran up to LA. JW and I got up. John Williams is our CEO. JW and I met here at Cordis at 5:30 in the morning. We drive up, spend about 12 hours in technical sessions and collaborative meetings, and then everything else. And we get back down here to San Diego at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. It was a day. But that kind of collaboration was exactly what the Space Economy Summit was supposed to be about. And it was a really kind of intimate set of sessions, and you could really sit down and talk with people and understand more about what they're doing and find opportunities. And I walked away from that in particular saying to myself, I really enjoy doing many of these smaller kind of industry events and really talking with people than the big giant events. I'd much rather do 3 smaller events back to back, kind of in a similar location, than go to one location and stay in the same place for 3 days and run around and do booths and all that other stuff. So that whole thing got triggered by Kimberly Washington at Deep Space Bio. And so she stumbled onto something interesting. So basically, it turns out that microgravity is an environment for highly accelerated life cycle testing for certain diseases and disorders, called HALT in the industry.
Okay.
Some fatty liver diseases, some types of cancers, and things like that. And when I say it out loud, I'm immediately reminded of any basic space medicine textbook is going to tell you that, right? But then how do you apply it? Well, she's also championing some initiatives on open science initiatives and making the data available, number one, but easy to assimilate, number two, and then applying artificial intelligence and interfacing with that data, and then handing those tools to the medical research community to pursue new therapies for these diseases. And because they've got the highly accelerated life cycle data, they can understand the changes in the course of a disease in they can basically condense years worth of change into months, and really accelerate the understanding of what's going on with those particular diseases. Super fascinating stuff.
Okay.
So that's one example.
I like it.
The whole thing was hosted by this gentleman named Oliver Morton, who I've never kind of seen or heard of before, but he's seems to be fairly senior with The Economist, and it was very clear to me very quickly that he knew exactly what he was talking about across the whole space industry and the defense industry.
Okay. Rare.
Right. So, I mean, I was hearing him use very specific terminology in perfect context that I typically don't hear. I can put it that way. At least not out in the regular world. And then he just did such a great job of facilitating conversation and moving things along. I think you just enjoy like talking with him because he's very gifted at what he does. I would gifted isn't the right word. I'm sure he's honed that over years of work and discipline practice and things like that. But he led interviews through much of it, including Chad Anderson, right, who we've talked about before and who's a recognized name. Chad offered these talking points where he's in his Space Investment Quarterly publication, he's pointing to like, industry investment's down. I kind of tell people like the pig is working its way through the python.
Yeah, well, it's like what you said. There was the money, and then now some of these folks are going to fall out because they don't really have businesses, but some are going to survive and demonstrate, hey, we actually have a product or a service that's going to work. That word facilitating was the one I was looking for earlier. Being a facilitator. Okay. It'd be interesting to watch him work. What do you say?
It's difficult to overstate how impressed I was. He's clearly a master of his craft. But what Chad had to say was that he's seeing new deals that indicate kind of that process is now complete. And it's time to kind of see another healthy influx of private investment into the space industry that happens to be coupled nicely with the timing of the next Starship launch. Right. So the expectation is sometime in October, maybe early November is the next launch. There's enough confidence that it will hit orbit that it's going to have a big effect. It's still hard to sense where New Glenn is at. But one thing I can say definitively that either the second time Starship hits orbit or even better, when both systems have hit orbit, the activity level is just going to be insane across the whole industry. What's also interesting as I talk to different people at these events is I think many people are designing for the capability of New Glenn with the idea that if they've got both systems online, New Glenn has a slightly smaller capacity. But by designing New Glenn, they can use either or.
Yeah.
Right. And when you say it out loud, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some people that are go big or go home. As soon as Starship capability comes online, they're ready to sort of unveil their grand plans there. So that's definitely a thing. And then there were some emerging companies as well that were interesting to talk to. So Areola Institute, they're developing these sort of large panel robots that assemble in orbit.
I like that.
And we're talking scales that are, entire orbits, right? Which is a great grand vision, but it starts with something smaller, and they're already doing some demonstrations near the International Space Station and some other things. So that was interesting. And then the Space Economy Summit in particular really sought to bring a variety of industries together. So Hilton Hotels was there, and a few others who have been interested in doing work in space for a long time. And this is the other thing that I'm excited about. I think a lot of you and a lot of other people will be excited about as well. I think we're really hitting this precipice where established industry is starting to see their place in the space economy more, and in applications in space.
Okay.
And not just on a small scale. Like, we're getting super heavy lift capacity online, reducing the cost of access, and bigger things that established industries are more comfortable with designing to are starting to really sit up and pay attention and have interest and form partnerships and form relationships. And that's a really critical part of kind of where I intersect with a lot of things. Like, I tell people that Cordis, space and defense is actually one of our smallest sectors of business.
Okay.
It's one of our favorites, but
okay. There is a commercial side.
There's a substantial commercial side.
Yeah.
Metrology for semiconductors is a big part of what we do. Consumer products is a big part of what we do. I can't name names, but I promise you've heard of all of them. And which is a whole interesting dynamic that I can get to. But they brought fresh perspectives to this Space Economy Summit. Morba Jha gave some great discussion points on stewardship and responsibility in space. And then I mentioned before, so Dr. Sian Proctor, who is part of Inspiration 4, we had a lunch and listened to her alongside Kim and some others. And so there were some interesting talking points that emerged from that about how this research artificial intelligence capability kind of plays into things. And then she offered some great talking points about diversity and inclusion in the space industry, which is becoming a more important topic for people to really understand. It's certainly something that's important for our organization. And she was able to offer a lot of firsthand anecdotes about being a civilian astronaut. There's not a lot of those running around, right? So the folks at The Economist really did a terrific job of pulling together quite an interesting crowd. And I'll say, and I'll keep beating on this until you listen to me. Like, we got to get you out to industry events.
Yeah, those cost money. Those cost money.
I was the beneficiary of one of the free passes in this case. So it just would have cost you a trip to LA.
Yeah.
In this case.
Okay. Well,
so
I didn't know the event was going on, so I wouldn't have even known to ask.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of The Economist as being something that had an interest or was super knowledgeable about it, right? I would expect them to
Well-
be commercially knowledgeable, but
Well, and they definitely have that,
yeah.
but
yeah,
I'm telling you, Oliver's got serious space chops, man.
yeah. No, there's a lot of news. I'm still rolling around the idea from the very beginning that a space company could be funded. It could have all the money that it needed, and it still couldn't attract the talent that it needed. That's mind blowing to me at this point, right? Like I'm gonna have to come down from that and really consider what it means, right? And I love collaborating, and I think it's a sensible thing. Everybody's always worried about their secret tech, right, and their competitive advantage and stuff. But if you want to get stuff done at this point,
well, and that's a key talking point.
more
and then,
silos.
right? Greg Baden offered an interesting point. I was chatting with him the other day. He actually came down to Cordis. He was here for a week. And we did a lot of talking, I'll put it that way. And he said, what's interesting about Cordis is it's not hard to attract engineers to San Diego relative to many other locations. And let me offer kind of another version of that, right? So when I came, my daily drive up to La Jolla, on the left-hand side, on the names of the buildings is nano, bio, gene, medical, therapy, all over the buildings on the left side. Okay. On the right side is several names that you would typically immediately associate with Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
All in this little hub in La Jolla. It's really interesting.
Yeah. There's the money and there's the activity.
Right. Well, and we've got Qualcomm here and Cubic and lots of other big brand names here in San Diego. So it's really not hard for San Diego as a location to attract really premium quality engineering talent. And it turns out, I was talking with somebody the other day. I can't remember. They just moved from Colorado, and Camille, I think. I'll have to find her last name. So she just moved to LA from Colorado, and she said the cost of living is the same, except the weather's better. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that was interesting in terms of commentary. Another contact at the Space Economy Summit. So that was a fascinating event. And then the DC Summit, there was a lot said there. So having Representative Joseph Morrell speak was, he really knew the issues of the industry and the policy needs and the policy activities associated with it. Like it was clear to me, like he understood it. He didn't just have like this briefing card that his staffer made, and he was just
5 minutes before.
it off.
Yeah.
Right. No, it wasn't like that. Like he was authentically engaged and committed to the industry. And there's a lot of industry leadership up in his area, and that's probably part of what drives it, which is great. But there was a lot of discussion about optics and photonics and how it enables and supports the semiconductor industry, the importance of that in great power competition, which was a theme definitively. I'd say at least a quarter of the speakers were from the Department of Defense. In particular, Frank Peterkin, who specializes in directed energy systems, laid out this exquisite tracing of policy to high-level strategy to low-level tactical, and everything in between. Just pop, walked right down it. I've never seen anybody do that so fluidly and so succinctly. It was really amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I can imagine just knowing the different organizations and cubby holes and start, stop kind of points.
yeah, it
Like I can't do that.
no, and
Yeah.
it's a maze.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, like I have
even
some big
struggle.
boxes and he's got a ton of little ones, right? I imagine with
Right.
that network.
And he just trotted right across them like it was nothing.
Huh.
And it was smooth and it was fluid.
Hmm.
It really well done. But we had a discussion about the importance of the defense industry getting more access to the premium quality talent in small businesses
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
what that looks like. And I stood up and offered some talking points, and I was really astounded by how much it resonated in the room. So there's definitively something there. Okay. I'm collaborating with some folks with my Navy hat on to understand what we might be able to do there.
Yeah.
I'm not quite ready to get into specifics on that yet, but relatively turnkey access to, say, 1,000 engineers for my organization. Okay. Who want to offer their perspective on the challenges we're facing. I think there's something I can generate some serious interest in there. So that's something that's on my plate, which kind of points to another thing. There was a lot of discussion about talent shortages, and not just in the engineering community. And have you experienced this also? Like what have you been seeing about talent shortage discussion?
I mean, I know it's important, but I don't know, maybe I haven't been touching companies enough lately. The last time I can remember somebody talking about it was Michael Mealing on Twitter some time ago, right? Or the thing that shall be known as X. It was
right.
it was a while back. I don't know. Yeah.
Everybody in the room had something to say about it.
Okay. I may have just taken my hands off the wheel for a little bit. It's just, yeah, again, the idea that you have the money and you can't attract enough talent is just mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling, and we're seeing the same thing.
Yeah. As Steve Blank is always saying, like, look, don't have a startup, get funded, and then hire like a big business vice president of sales, right? Because he'll screw it up and it's not his fault, right? But the feistiness and the roll with the punches and whatever is totally different than the calm, cool, collected, same big presentation that we do every time, right? For the VP of sales. And so when you say access to small business, I don't know, talent, is it like that we're talking about, or is it just more engineers, or like not everybody wants to work for a giant company? Right? There's a reason why I'm not corporate. I don't really fit well in a giant company,
How alone how unique do you think you are in that, man?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't fit in a giant company.
Not very.
No, and like that's like a cornerstone of like why I'm here and what this organization's about. I joke with people that Cordis is like in the profession of unicorn ranching.
Uh-huh.
And we take really good care of our unicorns.
If they have the funding and the leave you aloneness, right, and the right values, and then the people around you are fun to work with. Okay, right, and then it comes down to the teams.
Yep.
Who am I with? Who am I talking to on a daily basis? And do they annoy me or do they excite me? Well, that's the kind of thing that I'd be looking for.
Well, the values thing is it seems to be where that's what I'm sensing. So my leadership team and I talk about this a lot, where we say, hey, look, we're going to partner and make decisions based on our values first. Putting people first, doing things with integrity, having an insatiable curiosity, and being bold, but still smart in how we approach decisions and take risks. Those 4 things. Like everything starts from that in every conversation, both internally and externally. And, it's interesting when you go out and you lead with that at these events, like
Mhm.
it attracts a certain type of people,
Yeah.
both in terms of partnerships and talent. And it's really fascinating to kind of be emerging as an leader of organizations with that identity. It's something I didn't anticipate and didn't expect, and honestly, I haven't quite figured out what to do with it yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay,
people,
wait a minute. We're part of the gang of outsiders. Wait, we're supposed to not be doing this, right?
yeah.
Huh.
Well,
Okay.
it turns out you can
Yeah.
go around and lash up card-carrying members of the Good People Club
Mhm.
and have a serious talk about doing things together, and they're authentically interested and they're serious about doing it. They just need a little leadership.
Yeah. I mean, I found
And
that a
it's
few years ago. I would run into two people who had worked or talked about working together for 20 years, and then I would help them get doing something. But not at this scale. This is
well,
this
and
is
most everybody
scale.
says the same thing. Let's find a little project to do together.
Hmm.
Right now, little project to me ends up meaning like 10 million, but
Yeah.
so I kind of think on a different scale.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the common talking point is like, hey, let's find a little project to do together. Let's figure out how the relationship dynamics work and things like that, and get that smooth. And there's a process to that. It doesn't have to be big and laborious, but it's a process. Um, and that's one of the other interesting things that we do a lot is our kind of project range goes down from like $3,000 up to 3 million typically.
Mhm.
That's a huge spectrum. And we're just as interested in the little $3,000 niche analysis project as we are in the $3 million hardware development project.
Hmm.
And I've had engineers kind of stop me and be like, hey man, don't just chase the big stuff. I really like the small, weird stuff.
Hmm.
So if you can bag a few of those along the way, I'd like something fresh.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Doing something
Right.
different rather than the same thing over and over again. I get that.
Yep. So that's been interesting. So there was this big talk at the SPIE summit about talent shortages, which gave me an opportunity to talk about Titan Gilroy's work.
Mhm.
So Titan Gilroy started this, calls it the Titans of CNC Academy. And he got really sort of inspired to do it when he took some big hits in his business.
Mhm.
And he has set the standard for technical education. If you go dig on his website, Titans of CNC Academy, and look at his learning series, look at the documentation, look at the videos, look at the design work, look at everything that's kind of cross-connected to each element of that. It's really exquisite.
Yeah. I'm just pulling it up here on the other screen.
It's a different level of play.
Yeah.
And as far
what
as
is
like
his purpose here? What's his about or reason?
he's a champion for establishing manufacturing capabilities in the U.S. again, and being strong in that. And he recognizes that the only way to overcome numbers is through automation. That's how we compete. We can do better quality work faster through automation, like with CNC machining.
Yeah. Who's his target market here? Aerospace Academy. I'm gonna have fun looking through this.
Yeah. So he loves doing aerospace work,
Yeah,
but he's done plenty of other stuff too. And like the
Okay.
tighter the tolerances and the tighter the demands, the more he loves it.
Hmm.
The crazier the applications is, and his whole team too. Like you'll get to know his
Yeah.
team as you kind of go through his materials,
Right.
which I love about his work. He showcases his team a lot. And they're just big-hearted, hardworking people that are passionate about what they do and want to share it with the world and do it in a way that's really well organized and really well structured and really well produced. It's really something to look at. So I got to talk about his work a little bit because I followed it for years, and I really you probably picked up by now. I'm really impressed by who he is and what he's about and how he goes about things.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of discussion about quantum computing at the DC Summit. There's a lot more activity there than I think people realize.
Okay.
One person in particular, Christina Willis from Inflection, offered several talking points that really got people's attention about what's going on in quantum computing and where we're at and where the breakthroughs are at and how close we are to really doing some substantial things and what the applications are. That's a lot of what the questions are. Like, what are the applications and how do I leverage the capability? So there was a lot of talk about that, and there's a lot more that I think people really know. And
It's more than I know. I remember an article about quantum logic gates 20 years ago, right, with a little floaty thing in it, and it was like a black and white photo.
Well, I think people are intimidated by it too. You know, even the technical community.
Yeah, and the word means different things to different people, right? Quantum should mean small, but people use it as like a quantum leap type thing.
Sure.
So they, we all have to get our definitions straight beforehand. I'm still thinking about the CNC thing because, like, World War II, standardized parts. We've got the drawings, and some farmer in Iowa is making parts for tanks in his barn. And I think we've probably lost that capability, right? And it's all been done by industry at a smaller scale to this point. And then Titan here is like, hey, how about we bring that back? So that's why I'm interested in seeing who his ideal viewer is. Basically, is it the farmer going, I could do that, or is it a venture capitalist or a guy who has been running a machine shop who maybe goes, I should scale this way bigger?
I seriously doubt he had any of that in mind.
No,
when he stood this up, he just led with his passion, and everything else came, which we've all heard by now, follow your bliss. He stood up and did it, and it worked.
Yeah. I mean, it's
like, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that, right? It doesn't have to be so contrived.
Yeah.
He just followed what he's passionate about. People were attracted to that passion and resonated with it, and it turned into something terrific. And his organization does massive amounts of really premium quality work now because of that. And so, yeah, it's a thing. And like, we hear the advice all the time, but sometimes it's really difficult to follow. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the Venn diagram's got to be there, right? You have to have some way of making money or making a living with it, at least, or surviving with it. The passion. Otherwise, you just fizzle out.
Sure. Yeah, it needs direction. You can't just be an octopus on roller skates.
Right.
Right.
That's fun.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got a few of those in our adventures.
Yeah. I may have been one. I don't know.
I'm definitely guilty of it.
Let's define the quantum computing and what you're seeing then. Tell me more about that, because you're going to educate me, as you always do. What this is.
So there's a few things to it. And I'm a novice.
Yeah.
Right. But here's the way computing works right now. A whole bunch of little switches turn on and off. And make ones and zeros. And the speed at which that switching happens and the interlacing of that switching defines how much data you can fit into space. And so there's the space of the 1 and 0, and there's the space in between the ones and zeros. Okay. What happens when that same space is continuously filled with values between 0 and 9?
Okay.
So I said a few things there.
Yeah,
One, what can go in each individual space now ranges between 0 and 9 continuously. It's not discrete 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
So there's that. And there's no space in between the digits. It's two things.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
So how much more information can you condense in the same
Yeah.
amount of space that you used to be taking up with ones and zeros,
Right.
which started out as 1, 0, like Morse code,
Right.
right?
Vacuum tube
And
type
then,
stuff. Yeah.
right? And then 1, 0, 1, 0, and then faster and faster and faster,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, which is why we've got our
Continuous 0
gigahertz
through 9.
right, and our nanometer chip
Yep.
technology now.
Yeah. So
and this would erase all that. Basically, it would make it totally obsolete.
well, yeah, because my understanding is quantum computing is done with optics,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you get away from copper completely.
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a lot there. I'm doing more research on it, but it's there's a lot to learn. But we're getting so close that it seems like it's really worthwhile to understand it better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this sounds like the difference between the vacuum tubes and then the silicon wafer chips, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So and like
gonna
those
get that
order
much
of magnitude type steps.
Yeah.
That's what quantum offers, and it seems to be really close.
I wonder if we're going to see a Moore's law in that.
That's a great question.
That would be quite the accelerator.
That's a great question. I've got my eyes on some things there. Too early to tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll have to embrace the mystery there.
First thing that jumped into my head, though, it's like, wow, the acceleration, and then combining edge computing with AI, and that. Now we're grinding out the useless data at the source and having AI make these decisions. So the speed at which things can be done, right, and processing, and that's I don't even know what the applications are for something that require, like, what requires that much, horsepower basically to do it.
Well, I can offer a simple talking point. There are terabytes of data on orbit that never get down because we don't have the bandwidth to bring it all down.
Right. Yeah.
And there's value in all that data. We just never quite, get around to it. So what if you could upload all that and give that over to an AI that's got algorithms for what's called most effective tactics available? You familiar with that? Meta?
No. Huh.
Most effective tactics available.
Okay.
It is a distinct term in the application of artificial intelligence that I think the technical community really should understand better, because it's a thing. And so there's a lot there. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
So that was some of the things I learned at the DC Summit. There's a lot more collaborations and talking points that I'm not hitting on. But I got to drag you out to some more of these things. I'm gonna figure out a way to do it, man. Like, you're coming with me somehow, some way. I'll figure it out, because that's what I do. And then small sat was kind of my big kickoff event after I came to Cordis. And the industry's changed so much, so I was heads down on working a defense program for about 18 months, and I kind of lost track of some things. But when I finally came back up for air and then went to small sat, there's a few things I discovered. So previously, when I would go to these events, I'd be talking with people, and you always have to ask the question nowadays, like, did you fly? Right. And the answer was usually like, oh, our first flight's coming up in 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
A few members of the next year club, right? And that was kind of what you would typically get. Now, like, almost every person I talk to, they're like, yeah, we've flown twice and we're backlogged because there's not enough launch capability for our next flight, so we're waiting.
Okay.
That was the majority of the conversation.
That is interesting.
Completely different. Yeah, and you wouldn't know if you're not, like, out having the conversations, but I want to say there was like 230 companies there. And out of that, I wouldn't be surprised if 200 of them had flight heritage.
Okay. So that's good. Yeah, a lot have flight heritage, but this feedback that after being told for years now, oh no, there's too many launch companies. Stop building launch companies. Sorry, there's not enough launch capability available.
No,
That's
like
interesting
SpaceX is
feedback.
doing amazing things, but
Yeah.
there's still way more demand than they can keep up with.
Uh-huh.
Like people are waiting for several months for launch where their hardware is just sitting there waiting. Like that's still a pretty healthy backlog in any other business I know.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's probably a little bit of the nightclub velvet rope thing too. We don't want to feed it all and run through it, and then we've got nothing left. So
no, that's definitively not.
Or will it run out?
No, not even a conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not seeing anything.
So let's
like
get
that
more launch capacity in there. Then that's what we need. Okay.
Well, and that points towards my chat with Eric. So Eric Sawan, if you've never met him, he's very personable. I've encountered him a few times at different events, and I've always found him very easy to talk to and very pleasant. And I watched the first Firefly launch live. I took my son and my wife, and we went and watched it, and it blew up, and that's okay. But it was exciting, to see the first launch of a first system, right? And since then he had a successful launch, and then we were talking about how the successful second launch of a system is a critical inflection point. We talked about that. They're all important, but that one is really special. Hitting orbit for the second time is a thing, and they were getting ready for the most recent launch, and he wasn't anxious. He was excited, but it had a healthy dose of cautious optimism as well. And there are new partnerships with Northrop Grumman building a medium-sized vehicle, and some of the other things that are going on. Like the launch industry is still alive and kicking. And I talked to several launch providers that either had their first launch or about to have their first launch. They're not as well known perhaps as some of the big brands, but there's quite a few launch providers out there that are demonstrating reliable capability, and there's still a healthy backlog. Like that market is not crowded out.
Yeah. Okay.
And if anything, when Starship kicks off, they're going to be focused on the big, heavy stuff. And there's going to open up some space for all the smaller companies who can still only afford to do small payloads still. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because it's how they get their technical demonstrations, it's how they get their flight heritage. Because NASA, DOD, all the government customers, we're all saying the same thing. Like, we're not paying for people to get their first flight anymore, for the most part. There's so many other ways to do it. We shouldn't have to pay for that anymore. And so when people come to us, the first question is, just like the hangover, yes, but did you fly? Right?
Yeah.
And the answer of no, we haven't figured that out isn't really acceptable anymore. It's a different environment. So that was a big takeaway from SmallSat. And then, I was really amazed by, you talked to Bob Twiggs. I love Bob. He is just as enduring as he is intelligent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's still super passionate about what he's doing. But the whole SmallSat industry was really built on the development of the CubeSat standard. Right? It changed the whole industry. So I really, I kind of raise that talking point quite a bit when I'm running around there. Like, how we got here, right?
This guy. Yeah.
I don't think everybody knows.
No, I certainly didn't. And I don't know, just, having a chance to talk to him and have him on at your suggestion once again. Another great recommendation. Just, it makes everything more human, right? It's like, it's not some dusty rule book that got made in 1542 or something like that, right? It's a live human right here who worked on that. And they've lived through that. And I'm a big believer in understanding how we got here.
Sure.
Knowing the steps, and so that fits right in.
Yeah. So I mean,
Hmm.
it was amazing to see. And then we debuted. So it was a new thing for Cordis also. Like we debuted our first kind of internal IRAD to commercialization project. It was this high dynamic wavefront sensor, which it's a very technical term, but it's a metrology device for aligning and measuring error in optical alignments. Is the gist of it.
Okay.
With and so I got one of our junior engineers out there. His name's Peter Pillars. Super nice guy. And he was kind of debuting and kind of cutting his teeth on how to demonstrate it ahead of a much bigger optics industry event. It was developed by him and Jesse Melrose, who's one of our lead optical engineers here. And I was dragging people to our booth almost physically to come and poke at this thing so we could, put Peter through his paces. Right. One gentleman in particular, Paul Mark from Teledyne, was really kind of really got into it with him. And Teledyne develops photonic sensors in particular, and then plenty of other things too. But that's one of their specialties. And you could see Peter was just having a great time jamming with Paul on what the capabilities were and things like that. So that was fun to see. And then, and I mentioned Global Space Exchange also. Like I had a really interesting chat with them. Matt Marufi is the CEO there, I believe, and his organization has mapped out the whole space, or attempts to map out the whole space industry in a database, and what everybody's capabilities are, and who's doing what missions, and who's got what. Which is an interesting activity just by itself, right? And then let alone all the industry insights you can gain from that. So you run around, you make all these connections, and you talk to all these people about what they're really doing, and it's hard to not be excited. Like, and not just like the rah go space is cool. We're all Star Trek fans, kind of excited. Like legit, like real things are happening. Real value is moving. Real momentum, people committed to going to the moon to stay, people committed to, it's funny, this was raised at The Economist. I'll rephrase it slightly differently. So two ways of imagining our future in space, sort of a utopian Star Trek version, at least as far as Earth goes, or a dystopian, The Expanse kind of version. Right, like which version are we going to move towards? And I think the more utopian life of abundance that space offers is what many of us prefer.
Yeah,
right, and what we're trying to enable. And I think we're really starting to gain an understanding of what that looks like. But we're having a lot of conversations about how to do that responsibly. Because there's definitively irresponsible behaviors happening in space right now, right? And if you're only making rules for yourself and the other half of the world isn't going to play by them, what does that mean for all of us? Because space is inherently global, right? And so there's a lot going on, I think, that people know. I mean, you only find out by getting out, boots on the ground, face to face with people, and just classic old school run around and talking to people.
Well, how close are we to having a real commercial space industry? Because that's what made me tired, right? It looked like all this government expenditure, and I'm like, when is it going to be that we have commercial adoption of space stuff and lots of people buying things made in space, right? Just regular people. And I mean, maybe my target's wrong. Do we need to have that? Or is there enough money and interest and life in just keeping it on the sort of the military side of things?
No, definitely not. So I'm in more and more conversations that I was used to having behind closed doors,
Mm-hmm.
out in the open,
Okay.
in commercial context. A
Hmm.
lot more of those conversations. Um,
Hmm.
there's several companies we talked with about real things to be done in microgravity. They got to impact people now and in the near future.
That definitely will.
Most of it's data from space right now is the primary thing, right? Data has value, whether it's imagery or communications or position navigation, timing signals, GPS or whatever. Like all that's data coming from space
Mm-hmm.
in relationship to what's going on in Earth, which is fine. Products coming from space and being downmasked, we're within the next couple of years on that.
Yeah.
Where like somebody will use something that was made in space,
Mm-hmm.
very likely in the form of very specialized medications and some other things for really difficult to treat diseases. Then again, there's the synergy with deep space bio.
Yeah.
Right, and certain therapies and certain drugs targeting specific things. There may be some applications that can only be developed in some therapy, and then some drugs that can only be fully matured in microgravity.
Okay. Yeah, or 10 times faster or something like that. And
Sure.
here. And also there's the vibration thing. So, the crystals and the organs and stuff like that. So that's good. I can see that. But the medication thing is new to me. I really hadn't thought about that. We've got to grow something, but it's not an organ. And it gets packaged in a pill or a shot or something like that.
Well, and I have those moments running around all the time
Mm-hmm.
where people say it out loud, and you're like, well, when you say it, it makes sense, but I didn't have time to stop and think about that, or didn't. You know what I mean? Like you just needed a little tipping and cueing to stop and really look at it. And I have those conversations all the time at these events. Like people got to get out. Like I know maybe it's post-COVID era. Like people aren't used to like getting out again, and shaking hands and big hugs and like really, really sitting together and connecting. That could be part of it, but it's definitively out there, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of why it's easy for me to stay energized.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm experiencing. And I'm even more excited now because I'm in a position to like be running around and seeing all this stuff and be building all these partnerships and all these collaborations. It's building collaborative teams internally and externally is one of my primary mandates for my role.
Okay.
Right. Like that's what I do all day long. And like I said, I can pick up any two of these cards on my desk and have synergies between both of them and have conversations. Doesn't matter of any one of them, any pair of them. There's so much that different strengths that people bring individually and from their organizations. There's so much work to be done. There's plenty of money around. And it's not just DOD. Like I said, most of my business is not DOD in space.
Yeah.
Now we've done a lot of cool space stuff. We worked on James Webb and we worked on Spaceship One and we worked on a lot of other things. It's interesting. So like if you go to our website, we probably only put about 10% of our projects and customer base on our website. We do a deeper capabilities briefing behind a non-disclosure agreement. And even in that, we only touch on like 20%. There's plenty of opportunity out there.
Okay. So much folks for going and doing research on websites.
Yeah. Right. And I'm finding that more and more of our partners are, all of them are these, you go off in a corner and you work a deal. That's a lot of what's going on right now. And you got to be present and out there to get to have and start and be in these conversations. Yeah, we've come full circle from everybody locking themselves away in COVID.
That's
We're
good.
just not there anymore.
That's good.
Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible, far-ranging, multi-topic conversation there, huh? About the space industry, talent acquisition and collaboration, quantum computing, a little bit of AI, launch systems, and the big takeaway there, conversations in the open that used to be happening behind closed doors, right? For the commercial space field. If you are available to be in the room. So I really learned a lot once again from Tim, and hopefully you did too. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat next time.